Simi Valley, California. It's right between Moore Park and Santa Susana. You can Google it. I want to just say, how about this musical team, aren't they? They set the stage in such a powerful way. And I want to thank everyone here, the staff and Dr. Petra and all the folks that have made me feel so welcome. I'm really enjoying my time here. I'm a Dallas virgin. It's the first time I've ever been here. So I flew in on Virgin just to honor that. I've been to the airport about 1,000 times, but I've never been outside of it. But it's great to be here. So we're talking about defining God. And I was sitting there, I realized this is going to be a different talk than the first service. Because I want to put it in context of a personal story. 5 years ago, on Easter Sunday, 2008, I got one of those phone calls you don't want to get as a parent. I got a call that my 18-year-old daughter had been killed in a car accident. And she lived in Florida with her mom, and I was in California. And I got the call about 10 p.m. on Saturday night, so it wasn't Easter where I was yet, but it was where they were. And the next morning, I got on a plane and flew. I used the tickets we were going to use to go to her high school graduation in 6 weeks. And the airline was very kind about letting us switch. My wife was in Montana, so it was just kind of crazy. And going through the next couple of weeks with memorial service and the whole thing, what I needed at that point was the biggest God I could find. The biggest, most bottomless, most loving and caressing God I could find. And fortunately, I had that. I had it because I'd been in this teaching at that point for about 20 years. And I had learned to expand continuously my understanding, my definition of what God is. And the key to that in that moment of tremendous grief, not moment, but over time of tremendous grief was, here's what I found out. My grief had a bottom. So I could fall all the way to the bottom. Sometimes when you grieve, you're afraid that you're going to fall into a pit and never get out. But what I knew was that underneath that grief was radiance. Just like above the clouds, there's sunshine. And I knew that, and I trusted that, and I just let myself, I was just lost for about 3 weeks. Don't have a lot of memory of that time. And I had a great support system of people. I had been the pastor in Fort Lauderdale for some time. That's where we did the memorial service, and there were 700 people at the memorial service. And, as you can imagine, it was the kid that dies right before graduation. And she was just an amazing young woman. She was 5'10" and blonde, and getting ready to go to college, and just doing some amazing things. She was one of the instigators of the Malawi School Project that our teams in CSL started, and now we've built 18 schools, one of them named for my daughter. So the idea of defining God, I think, is one of the critical things we need to learn to do in this teaching, because most of us weren't raised in this teaching. We come from other places. We come from other traditions. We come from other cultures of spirituality. This image was created by Reverend Bob Luckin, one of our ministers, who's an amazing artist, and he made it for Caitlin. And the very top and the centerpiece is the cover of my book. And he said it represents the feathers of the angels. So I use it in this presentation. Why define God? I mean, the idea seems, well, if you come from a traditional religion, it's blasphemous, isn't it? Someone else is supposed to define God for you. Or read the Bible. There's only about 38 versions of God in there. Pick one you like. There's Yahweh, who's your drunken uncle. Does things for no reason, mood swings and all that stuff. There's Elohim, which is the first deity mentioned in the Bible, the one that says, let there be light, which is a plural. Elohim is gods. And then there's the God of the New Testament that Jesus brought forth, which is a God of opulent love and forgiveness, which Paul then reverted back to the Old Testament God of fire and brimstone, because Paul was a better marketer than Jesus. He knew what would sell. He did. He knew what would sell. He knew that people needed to be in fear of their religion in order to show up in great numbers. And that's still largely true today. I often say what Jesus said wasn't very popular 2,000 years ago, and it still hasn't caught on. Love one another. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. He said. Yet that's what we struggle with, isn't it? Well, actually, we do love our neighbor as we love ourselves quite often, and that's the problem. We don't think very much of ourselves. Dr. Ernest Holmes, you may have heard of him. If you haven't, you should. He said, the world is saturated with divinity, immersed in reality, and filled with possibility. We must take this divine possibility and mold it into present actuality and everyday experience. This is the way to freedom, the pathway to peace and happiness. Now that's a long version of his most famous quote, which is, there's a power in the universe that is greater than you are and you can use it. When I first came into this teaching, I first heard those words, and what a little voice inside said, oh, that's blasphemy. I can use God? Not the God I learned about in Catholic school, which was my version. That God was a God who was sitting up in his big gold-paneled office in heaven with a white suit and a big gold G on his pocket, writing down everything I did under the covers at night in his book. And we were all awaiting Judgment Day when he would read that book out loud in front of everyone. The most boring day I could imagine. Can you imagine? I mean, my sins are interesting, but I'm not too interested in yours. Anyway, that was kind of what I grew up with. And I mentioned at the first service, there was a study done, it was back in the 90s, but I think it's probably still relevant, that looked at Americans' view of God. And what they found was two interesting things. One was that the average American adult had the same basic idea of the nature of God as the average American 5-year-old. That the idea of God didn't develop over time, that the religious education or whatever they received kind of kept that sort of a childish view of this magical, mythical deity. And the other thing was that the idea or the definition of God that most American adults had little or nothing to do with their religious education or training, and had everything to do with the temperament of the house in which they were raised when they were very young. That some people lived in Old Testament households where there was a lot of judging and stuff going on, a lot of punishing. And others lived in smaller number, New Testament households where there was lots of love and forgiveness. And they would tend to take on that kind of an idea of God because that's what we do. We project ourselves into this idea of what God or what Spirit is. Well, we might as well do it with God. We do it with everybody else. You don't have a relationship with anyone. You have a relationship with your projections onto them that they mirror back to you. So we do the same thing with Spirit. We sort of decide over time, mostly unconsciously it seems. Very little conscious energy goes into this for most people. And we end up with this idea, this feeling tone of what that ultimate reality is, and then we conduct ourselves accordingly. So most people live in fear. We've been taught you should have the fear of God in you. Okay, now in order to have the fear of God in you, in order for that to make any sense, your definition of God has to be something to be afraid of. And the only way that God can be something to be afraid of is if God has a personality. If God is some kind of an individual, kind of like a human being, doesn't sound much like projection there, who would use human judgment or a human mind to run the universe. Okay. But Dr. Holmes talks about being saturated with divinity, immersed in reality with a capital R, and filled with possibility. So we talk about the idea of God as an infinite. An infinite. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Kabir, one of the great ecstatic poets of the Sufi tradition, was in India in about the 12th century, around the same time as Rumi was in Persia. And he said, "Behold but one in all things. It is the second that leads you astray." Now he's talking about the difference between oneness and duality, or I like to call duality two-ness. Oneness and two-ness. Now when you come into a human incarnation, you come into a world of two-ness. Because everything has a physical dimension, and there are aspects of qualities, and we call those polarities. You might have heard about those. An example of a polarity would be between light and dark. At one end of the polarity, light is fully present. At the other end of the polarity, it's fully dark. What we know about these polarities is, when you get to the negative side of the polarity, it's not that it's not that darkness is real, it's just the absence of light. Right? Anybody ever been in a dark room? Anybody? A couple of you. Now what happens when you turn on a light? Now you can go home and try this tonight. Okay, the room is dark and you turn on the light, and the room is light, right? If you've paid the bill. Okay. You don't have to get a bunch of boxes and pack up the dark and take it into another place. Because the dark isn't real. It's simply the absence of light. All the polarities are like that. There's love and fear. There's being and non-being. There's alive and not alive. And we have all these different polarities that we exist in, which is called duality. And we exist, in the one between light and dark. You don't want to be at either end of the spectrum, because if it's 100% light, you're blind. And if it's 0% light, you're blind. So we exist in the middle, in kind of the shadows, where there's enough light that we can distinguish, but there's enough darkness that you can also figure out what's there. So we have all these different polarities, and all these polarities represent energy. And we're full of them. There's masculine and feminine, by the way, is two polarities, not one. It's not sliding scale from masculine to feminine. It's masculine, feminine, and then the absence. And we're all somewhere on those scales, which determines gender, which determines all the kinds of things that have to do with stuff like what you do in the bathroom in the morning to get ready. So God is all that too. The oneness, the idea of an infinite idea. Infinite means infinite. Now that's something, anybody ever heard that word before, infinite? It's a word that we all know, but none of us understand. The human mind is not capable of fully understanding an infinite. An infinite is infinite infinitely, which means you can only have one. You can't have an infinite and something. See, if even one atom gets outside the infinite, it's not an infinite anymore. So if God is infinite, and we're not the only spiritual teaching that says that. Most do, just most don't act like they believe it's true. If God is infinite, and everything that exists is part of the infinite, guess what? So are you. You cannot be separate from God. Now, God isn't a being. God is, the best example, I think, the best analogy is the Force in Star Wars. God's like that. The Force in Star Wars is the creative energy of the universe, and it's a field of pure potential. And when you can tap into that field responds to you as you are. See, that's why when we pray, when we do spiritual mind treatment or prayer or whatever we're calling it this week, well, I don't pray to ask God to be changed. Do you? I used to when I was a little kid. I learned, I want a red bicycle, and I would pray to God, give me a red bicycle. You didn't give me one today, give me one tomorrow. I wasn't going to change. I was just expecting God to do something that He didn't do yesterday. And then if I didn't get it, I might start to bargain. If you give me my bicycle, I promise I'll, I don't know what I would say at 7, I'll stop thinking impure thoughts. There's a lot of emphasis on that at our school. To stop thinking impure thoughts. I had to find out what they were so I could stop. No, so what we do in our prayer is we pray to change our mind. In other words, we pray to change the one praying. To change and alter my field of receptivity so that I'm receptive to what I would desire rather than what I don't. Because in the field of pure potential, which is everything, infinite, it's simply there, and it has a bias toward expression. But in order to express into actuality, as Dr. Holmes said, it has to come through a vessel of intelligence that has a receptive field. That's what you and I are. We're vessels of intelligence that have a receptive field. We are mobile actualizing units. You're an MAU. Walk around saying that. Don't worry, I'm an MAU. I'll actualize it in just a minute. That's what we do, right? We pull from the realm of pure potential and actualize according to our consciousness, which is simply the collection of beliefs and knowings that we have accumulated by means of our thought. So how do we build a consciousness? We think it into being. You've been thinking your consciousness into being since you showed up on the planet. Okay? I hope you're proud of your work. If you don't like aspects of what your consciousness is, and the only way to tell what your consciousness is to look at the effect in your life, because the consciousness is subconscious. God's great trick on us. He keeps the belief in the subconscious realm, which we can't directly access. You can have a belief that's conscious, that's in direct opposition to a subconscious belief you hold, and the subconscious belief is the one that'll manifest. It's called denial. Right? So we have to build that subconscious belief structure in a conscious way in order to create the field of receptivity that will draw into and through us the highest and best good. Whatever that is. And that'll be different for every person here. And we'll have a different version of spirit or God that we're thinking into. So the first step of our prayer treatment is the nature of spirit and calling on that. And in order to create a consciousness of deep, unconditional love and expectation. That I live in a universe that supports me. In fact, if there is a conspiracy, it's in your favor. Because the universe has a bias to express. And it can only express through you what you become receptive to. So, how do we define God? Well, first of all, you're already doing it. You've been doing it your whole life. Maybe you haven't been paying attention. So some people don't even know what their definition of God is. When you sit down to do a prayer treatment, and for those of you that know how to do that, and you start to do the first step, a good indication would be, how do you feel when you think about God? If it isn't wonderful and amazing, then you've probably got a definition that isn't working for you. Now, the good news is you're dealing with an infinite, so whatever the hell you say God is to you. That's the way it works. Whatever you say God is to you. Because the universe, as God always says yes to whatever you become receptive to. So if I'm an Old Testament God, I got a punishing God in here, and I start to affirm my own magnificence, disconnect. You know, that it's, if your system was Windows, it would shut down. You get an error 404 message. Does not compute. Or it would say, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Your definition is yours alone. We said that. And the question is, does it work? Well, isn't my definition supposed to be set by an authority outside myself in the church or whatever, and I'm supposed to just follow it? It's an option. You can do that, but it's still your definition. And if it doesn't work for me, isn't that because I'm unworthy? Well, you can believe that too. You know, suffer all you want, but suffering's optional. You know, doesn't God want me to suffer? What kind of God would want you to suffer? You know, if that's the case, put me in another universe with a different God. I'm tired of this one. When I go to hell, well, that's where all the interesting people are going to be anyway. Sitting around saying, man, it's hot. And your definition of God should be a working definition that changes as you do. As you grow in your capacity to understand the depth of being, your definition expands and deepens. Okay? Just go ahead here. So some of the questions. What is my definition? It might be good to spend some time thinking about that, contemplating, what do I, you know, and really look at the feeling tone. When you think about God or Spirit or whatever term you use, people have issue with the G word or whatever. Doesn't matter what you call it. Call it Bruce. Doesn't care. Okay. Reverend Helen Street used to call it Big Sweetie. What is my definition? Does my God have form? Am I picturing like a being, you know? Like George Burns in, you know, Oh God, or something like that. Or you're thinking about, you know, the guy in the white suit or whatever it is, or a crystal, or does your God have a form? And if so, is that form in any way limiting to your understanding of how things work? What image have I given God? It's kind of good to have an image when you do that first step of treatment. What image would you use if God doesn't have any form? Well, you could use the whole universe as your image. Use a cloud. Use something that would allow you to feel a good feeling, that you're held and nurtured and supported within the framework of this reality. How is this definition working for or against me in my life? Big issue. Because again, I remember my mom passed away a few years ago. She was a dyed-in-the-wool Catholic. She converted to Catholicism, so that was a big deal. And, you know, when that Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson atrocity movie came out, she called me and says, Jim, I think I should go see that. And she just hated gore. I mean, you know, she didn't like it. I said, Mom, what do you want to do that for? It's going to be really disturbing for you. It's a gory movie. It's probably not based on anything that's true. She goes, well, I think I should suffer the way Jesus did. I said, I think if you see that movie, you'll suffer more than Jesus. But go ahead, it'll make you feel better, you know? And she went and she cried for 3 days and she felt so holy. And I just said, Jesus, Mom. The only thing my father ever taught me about Jesus was that his middle initial was H. So we start with some basics, and we're going to move on to that part. God is all there is. Infinite, okay? That's next. Infinite. All there is, infinite. There is not a spot where God is not, which is this 5th grade version of that. But that's really it. We've got to get that. We're never separate or apart. We're not individuals. We are individualized expressions of one. Like the fingers on your hand are not individuals. If you chop off your index finger, don't try this at home, it doesn't know it's a finger. If you cut it off, it just lays there. See? Once it's separated from source, it no longer works. The same is true of us, although we have an invisible connection to source. You are one with everyone and everything. You are part of a globalized human mind that is part of a larger globalized mind of all things that are alive, that is part of a larger universal mind. Our experience tends to be up here near the fingertip, if you will, but our reality is the whole thing. And we have to kind of know that. That's the faith we build. God is accessed from within. When I change my mind, I have a different experience. God isn't up there in the sky somewhere, although, yeah, God's everywhere and everything, but my point of access is inner. Go within and know the truth. Okay? The law through which it works is impersonal. Doesn't play favorites. Doesn't pick on you. Doesn't favor you. Even though we like to think that, don't we? Our ego loves to think we're special. Loves to think we're getting picked on. You're just singling me out. My whole life, black cloud, following me around. God. You know, sometimes we're just like a little clot of ailments. Wondering why the world won't make us happy. And God love you if you are. The compassionate thing to say is, okay, honey, but that's not true. You're making it up. Make up something better. We're making it up anyway. We're all just creating stuff in our mind and projecting it out into the world. The world faithfully mirrors it back to us, and we think we're being objective. There's no such thing as an objective human being. We're simply living in our own projections, and the projections arise out of what we have accepted as true, whether it's true or not. Has anyone here ever had a misunderstanding? Where you thought something was true and then you found out it wasn't? Well, go back to before you found out it wasn't true. It was as good as true, right? You didn't know you were wrong until you found out you were wrong. Being wrong feels just like being right until you find out you're wrong. Now, I know you all know people that suffer from this. But look in the mirror, because we all do about something. So how can I be, so my awareness of that can help me to be more honest with myself, more self-honesty, more self-awareness, greater idea of God. This is a little worksheet you can make up on your own. If you send me a message on Facebook, I'll send you one. It's just the top half of the sheet. It lists the qualities of God as you understand them, and that's going to continue to grow. And on the bottom, you do some kind of a drawing or image, or you don't, if you're not a drawer, get up and do an interpretive dance or something like that. But you want to have something that gives you a visceral kind of a emotional connection with spirit, whatever that is for you. And then you might go through, do one of these every 6 months to see what's changing for you. And you can use your own paper. It's okay. This is not an official thing. I define God, but I don't have the worksheet. So this afternoon at the workshop, what we're going to do is look at the third part. The first part of the book is about spirit. The second part is looking at the nature of reality. The third part is the nature of practice. And in the workshop, we're going to look at a number of spiritual practices that can help you to fully come to an integration between your awareness of spirit, your relationship to the world around you, so that you can manifest the life you desire. And I hope you'll be able to join. If not, friend me on Facebook. I'm Jim Lockard. I'm at Jim Lockard on Twitter. And on feed.com, I'm Eleanor Rigby. Thank you, and namaste. Now, I don't do this at home, so I have to be reminded. So let me invite you to go within and know the truth with me. Take a nice deep breath and let it out as a sigh. And I move into that center space, that heart space, where I am one with everything, everyone, where I am in a place of deep acceptance and forgiveness, where I'm in a place that says yes to new possibilities, new ideas, where I can confront the idea that I might have some mistaken notions about some things in a place of peace and right receptivity. And from this place of knowing, I open to a greater possibility of who and what I am. I know that if God is one and God is infinite, then I am one with that infinite, and there is no separating me from the nature of my own divine identity. Despite what I've been told, I am worthy of a good life. Despite what I may have been told, I have within me everything I need to create and manifest that life. And I allow that field to build within me, that field of receptivity to a greater good, a greater idea, a bigger picture, so that I can be truly of service in this world. So that I can give the gift I came here to give. It might just be raising one child. It might be transforming a nation. But whatever it is, it's mine to do, and I can only do it when I am filled with the realization of what is already true. So today I embrace this bigger version. I embrace this grander version. I embrace this more loving, compassionate version of myself. And I give myself permission to bask in this sunlight. I'm so grateful for this awareness in my life. I'm so grateful for this amazing philosophy, the science of mind. I'm grateful for all those on whose shoulders we stand, from Dr. Holmes forward, so that I can be here right now in a place that accepts me as I am and helps me to become who I am becoming. So good. So good. And whatever the losses of my life may be, I know that ultimately nothing is lost. Everything exists in the one. It's just a continuous change in form. And I embrace this notion because it is reality, and it's not good to argue with reality. So from this place of gratitude, I release this word into the creative field that we call mind, knowing it is done unto me as I believe, and together we say,